Hello humans, it's just Martine, and it's time for another episode of TBR Crime. TBR Crime is my bi-monthly TBR game. Detective Blake Pradera chooses a partner from his squad and goes around a board solving crimes. It's silly, it's goofy, it's a fun time. This is the May-June round. If you want to catch up on all the previous episodes, the playlist is linked right here. So far this year, we have 27 cool points. So without further ado, let's get playing so we can increase that number. Here we are for episode 10 of TBR Crime. I am nervous for this round because all of the cards from my last cold case are officially back in the stacks. So anything could happen today. Anything at all. First, we're going to go ahead and pick our partner for solving this case. Our partner is Frank Gopnik. His advantage is roleplay, so every clue is worth double the cool points, but his disadvantage is that Frank absolutely cannot read a room, so every action prompt is only worth 1 cool point. Green is worth double the points, blue is only worth 1 point no matter what it says. There's nothing in there about how we have to set up the board, so we're gonna go ahead and randomize it. All right, here's what the board is looking like for episode 10. I'm not loving the spread of things, but honestly, this die will determine what happens. So, without further ado, roll 1. That's a 2. Immediately starting in a way that I don't like, we're headed for a pink. We're collecting a witness statement and reading a borrowed book. As is typical of me, I borrowed a book from the library. It was the Shelf This book club pick for the month of May, The Names by Florence Knapp, and I'm giving it 4 stars. The idea for this book is so cool and interesting, and I feel like it was executed solidly, so hence the 4-star rating. The idea is this. We start and we're following a mom as she's making her way to go register her new baby's name. And while she's on her way there are 3 possibilities about what this child could be named. There is the name his sister recommends, there is the name that his mom wants, and then there is the name that his dad wants because it is tradition in the family. And then in every subsequent section of the book, we're following 3 alternate timelines depending on what name was chosen on that day. So we're following a timeline for Bear, a timeline for Julian, and a timeline for Gordon. And it's such an interesting commentary on the power of names and the power of small decisions in our lives. I feel like words are extremely powerful. The words we say to ourselves matter. The words we say to other people matter. The words we use to talk about certain things or people, those all matter. And this book is about how that matters and how those decisions shape us. And I really, really loved that exploration. If you're at all interested in this book, I would go ahead and look up the content warnings because it does cover some very serious, sad things. So just be aware of that going in. There is not a single timeline that is completely happy, which I love because it showcases that, like, yes, these decisions do matter, but there is always good and there is always bad. Both of those things always have to live together. You cannot have something that is all good. You cannot have something that is all bad. It is always a mix. And I think so many people, when they think about regrets, say, if I had just changed this small thing, everything would be better. And the truth is just that everything would be different. And different does not necessarily mean better. Some things would be better and some things would be worse. It is always a trade-off. And I loved that this book lived in that nuance. So on to the next roll. Roll 2. Just 1. But it's a bonus. That's exciting. We're going to have a light bulb moment and see how the very little evidence we have so far fits together. So we're going to read from an author we've read from before. I think that's what this means. Read from before. It's an author we've read from before. Last year during the 12 TBRs of Christmas, I read The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. So for an author I've read from before, I read Digital Fortress, also by Dan Brown, and I'm giving this one 3.5 stars. I had so much fun with this book. It is a techno thriller. I think that's the best genre description I can give of it. We're following two main perspectives. The first is this woman who works at this government agency that's all about cryptography, and they have this giant machine that is able to decode really, really complex things. But she gets called into work on a Saturday by her boss and is told somebody has made an unbreakable code, and this machine has been running for 15 hours without finding a solution. And so they need to do something about it. The other perspective is the fiance of the main female character. He is a professor at a university, but he's really good with languages, like that's his thing. And so when the creator of this unbreakable code is suddenly deceased, he is sent to the country where it happened to try and figure out what's going on and to try and find a passcode hidden in the belongings of this individual. And things do not go as planned for either one of our main characters. This was such a wild ride in exactly a Dan Brown fashion. Like, having read the Da Vinci Code and now reading this, there is definitely a level of excitement that Dan Brown can bring where he makes things spiral so hugely out of control, not even just rapidly, but like the scope of how out of control things get is wild. And I don't know about his other books, but at least in the two that I've read, it's always on an international scale, like worldwide level problem that we're dealing with, something that spans multiple countries, probably multiple continents, with huge repercussions and always codes. And I love code breaking in books. Growing up, there was this list of books in the state of Florida that you could read every year, and if you read a certain amount, you could get certain prizes. And I will always remember that there was this one specific book, one of the years, about a puzzle solving competition, and I was obsessed with that book, loved it so much. And so I definitely think people solving puzzles is a thing that I can get behind in books, and Dan Brown loves to have a puzzle for them to solve. I was about to say a little puzzle for them to solve, but they're always big puzzles. The final solution to a puzzle right at the end, I did figure out before our main characters did, but to be fair to them, they were in a very dire situation, and I was in the comfort of my apartment going, I think the answer's a little simpler than you're believing. I also think that's a downfall of being really great at codes, is you're looking for really, really complex answers. And I was like, tone it down. I think the answer's a little simpler than that, especially because you're a character in a book and the author had to come up with that code. So like, it's clever. It's very, very clever. But your answer needs to be a little lower level than you were reaching for. And I know that when I actually try to solve puzzles in real life, I overthink it so much. And so I understand exactly what was going through their minds, because my mind does exactly that same thing, where you see a potential solution, even though it's complex, and you go chasing after that instead of realizing that maybe you left something simpler behind you. Nevertheless, this book kept me guessing. I did not know who to trust. I did not know what anybody's motivations were. Things kept flip-flopping around. I was deeply worried about the safety of both of our characters, actually. I was going to say our main male character, because I do feel like he was in a lot more physical danger, but then some crazy stuff also happened with our main female character, so I don't know. I was worried about both of them. Mystery thrillers just don't always get super high ratings from me, even if I really enjoy them, because they aren't necessarily going to be impactful books for me, and I tend to reserve higher ratings for things that I really, really emotionally connect with, that resonate for me and my understanding of the world, the universe, humanity, whatever, and these are just a really fun time. So understand that about my rating. If I tended to give mystery and thrillers higher ratings, it would be because it's this kind of book. It was unputdownable. So fun. The chapters were so short. I was flying. So really glad I got to pick this up. And 2 for 2, I've had fun with both of the Dan Brown books that I've read now. So I should definitely keep an eye on his other books in the future. If you've read Dan Brown before and have a favorite of his works, please let me know your recommendations down below. Roll 3. It's another one. No matter what this says, this will be worth 1 point. We're going to retrace our steps, and someone from my family is going to pick my next read. When I was visiting home last week, I gave my sister a list of all the books that I currently have checked out on Kindle Unlimited, and I told her to pick what I would start that day. And she chose A Fatal Grace by Louise Penny, perfectly falling into my trap that I had definitely laid for her. I knew she would probably be picking this book when I handed over that list to her because she's been raving about this book for a couple months. She gave it 4.5 stars, and she has been patiently waiting for me to finally continue this series because this is the second book in the Inspector Gamache series. This also feels like a family pick for other reasons, namely that it is one of my mother's favorite series of all time, and that it feels like family because our setting in this series is Quebec, up in Canada. We're following a Quebecois detective inspector who solves murders. And so a lot of the traditions that the people in this book series do are traditions that either my family practices or that my mom practiced growing up and that she's told us all about. For instance, this one was set around Christmas time and they had a réveillon after midnight mass. And I will definitely say that one of the things I like the most about this series is how French Canadian it is. There are so many things that they mentioned that make me smile. However, I'm still having trouble really settling into this series and caring about our primary character, Inspector Gamache. I'm giving this book 3 stars, which is unfortunate because I thought I would like it better than I liked book 1. And I don't feel like I did. I feel like I liked them pretty equally. I gave the first book 3.5 stars, but that was last year when my ratings were slightly different, so probably about the same vibe as this one for me. This one involves a murder at a curling match, which is so Canadian. What a fabulous setup for a murder mystery book, we'll just say it. But I once again had trouble connecting with the inspector. He is touted as being so utterly brilliant, and he makes good solves, but I don't feel like he's brilliant in the way that I want him to be. He's a little elusive to me, and if he's going to be elusive, he needs to be far more brilliant, like Sherlock Holmes. And if he's going to be as brilliant as he is, which is still fairly brilliant, then I'm going to need him to be less elusive. Them's the rules for my brain. I don't know why, but it is what it is. I thought this was a solid mystery. I had a pretty fun time with it. I managed to read about 68% of it in one day. So I had a good time going through it, but it just didn't hit any better than that. It was solid, but I didn't have a fabulous, great, amazing time reading it. I also think there was a huge accessibility issue for me with this ebook copy of the book because I was reading it and I turned to my sister and I was like, were there breaks before we switched characters' perspectives when you read the book? And she was like, yeah, there were. That's when I figured out that there were definitely breaks in between character switches in my copy of the ebook, but because of the font size that I have my Kindle at, they would land at the bottom of a page. So I would flip the page, it'd be like a whole page of text, and then I'd flip the page and there would be a whole page of text. So it didn't look like there was a break, but there had been a break. And if I had made the font size smaller, I would have seen that there was a break. But I'm not changing my font size because of your poor formatting decisions. And this is why I think it's really important that authors have like something physical on the page that denotes a breakage other than just space, because when you change the spacing for font size, especially in an ebook, it's going to make this happen. And I think one of the reasons I had a lot of trouble connecting with this book is because we kept switching perspectives and I didn't know we were switching perspectives. And so it would take me a couple sentences to realize, oh, this is not the character I was just reading from, and then situate myself in them instead of having a break and being like, oh, we're switching characters and being able to switch. I had to find that out mid-reading, which was terrible. I hate that feeling so much because it's confusing and just unpleasant. So that was really, really, really working against me in this book. And I know I probably shouldn't take it out on the book, but it impacted my reading experience, and my rating is a reflection of my reading experience. And so, yeah. And once I figured that out, I still wasn't going to change my font size because I keep my Kindle at that font size for a reason. I like when the words are that big. My eyes don't have to work so hard. That was a major issue. Hated that. Overall, had a fun time with this book. I'm going to keep trying this series, if anything. The fact that it feels like home, that it makes me feel close to my mom and my family that's up in Canada is great, and so I'll continue reading for that reason. If that was not the case, if this was any other series set anywhere else, I would probably drop it by now because it's good, but not great enough for me to really want to continue. But I do just love the setting in Quebec and all of the French-Canadian traditions that are mentioned in this series, so continue it I shall. Roll 4. Another one. This will be worth double the points. We get some CCTV footage, and we're going to read a book written by a celebrity. The last couple times I've had to read for this prompt, I've stuck with memoirs because that's the easiest way to find a book written by a celebrity. But here's the thing. One, I'm not a huge fan of memoirs. And two, I've read at least 2 memoirs already this year and don't have any on my list that I'm chomping at the bit to get to. Nothing has come out that I'm particularly excited to read in that category. And so I had to do a little research and find books that are not memoirs that are written by celebrities. And that's when I found out that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote Mycroft Holmes. I'm not sure what possessed him to write a mystery book involving the infamous Holmes family, but he did. And so I was like, I'm going to read that, especially because it had a red cover, and so it got me extra points during Wonderthon. So I read it during those 2 weeks. I think I actually read it at the end of week 1, and now Wonderthon is over. So this is your heads up that I don't remember like anything about this book. Looking back on Bookly, I know that I gave it 2.5 stars, and I'm sure I had solid reasons for doing that at the time. In my mind, this book was just okay, and I guess I was having the conversation at the beginning of the year with myself of like, just okay has to be 2.5 stars to me, like that's what it means. So if I remember it was just okay, I don't know why I'm shocked I gave it 2.5 stars. Like, it makes sense. Fine, okay. In this one, we're following Mycroft Holmes, the older brother of Sherlock. Of course, Sherlock is more famous, but Mycroft appears in all of the Sherlock-related media. And specifically, Mycroft is in love with this one woman, but then she decides to leave and go back home to Trinidad because something nefarious is happening there. Like, people keep going missing and turning up dead. And she's like, I gotta go. And so even though she's like, you can't come with me, you're staying here, I'm going to see to this, he goes and is trying to figure out what happened. I think my favorite part of this was seeing a younger Sherlock Holmes. I think he was a very young adult in this one, and seeing him from Mycroft's perspective, like, here's my little brother. Like, his thoughts about Sherlock were really interesting, and Sherlock Holmes is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, so I enjoyed that aspect of it. I don't think the mystery or the solves were anything mind-blowing, which personally I feel like is a requirement if you're going to write a book with a main character whose name is Holmes. Like, that's what I expect, is for some solve to blow me absolutely out of the water. And it didn't. So, like, it was fine. I had a pretty good time reading it, and I don't remember much of it now, and it's over. And so I get my points, and I move right along to the next roll. Roll 5. A 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Uh-oh. Frank and Blake have a fight, and so I have to read an intimidating read. Great. Different books are intimidating for different reasons. I think when I see the prompt intimidating read, the first place that my mind goes is long read, but I ended up picking a book that is long but not stupid long, but has some other facets that also made it intimidating on top of the length. So I read The Fallen and the Kiss of Dusk by Carissa Broadbent, which I'm giving 3 stars. This book is almost 600 pages, so she's not short by any means. And this is the 4th book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, which is technically 3 duets all squished together in one series, which is a book that I really, really liked last year, was it? Beginning of the year, when I read my friend's favorite books of the year before. And then I read the second book, and it wasn't as good as the first because we didn't have the game element that we had in the first book. And then I started the second duet, which I was excited about because it stars one of my favorite characters from the original duet. So I thought it was all going to be great. Well, I read that book during Wonderthon last year and had honestly no clue what was happening the whole time. So I've been afraid to read the next book. I at least wanted to finish out the duet before deciding whether or not I was going to continue with the rest of the series. After reading this one, I'm not going to continue. This is going to be where I call it for the series, but I am glad that I gave this one a shot. I think there were a very specific set of circumstances that made the last book such a flop for me. And this one was fine, and I think a strong book, but not the kind of book that I'm looking for, which is typically what a 3-star is. Like, I think someone else could really love this book, but I don't think it's for me. And I don't think there was anything necessarily bad about it. I just didn't have anything that I really loved about it either. This book was intimidating to me not only because it was long, but because I wasn't sure that I would be able to understand at all what was happening since I couldn't seem to follow the book before it. And this one was a direct continuation of that story. And it was also intimidating because I decided to read this one during this year's Wonderthon, even though I know that reading the third book during last year's Wonderthon is part of what made it such an unenjoyable experience. But do I learn from my mistakes? Absolutely not. So we did it. But 3 stars, pretty good. This is a romantasy series. I honestly can't tell you what it's about because the first book is just so different from the rest of the series. There are vampires. I really don't know what else to say. The first book in the series is like The Hunger Games with vampires. Loved that about it. Everything else is just like, okay, what happened after that? And I'm done finding out what happened after that, frankly. So I was intimidated, but I got through it, and now I'm not going to read any more from the series. I'm going to let it fade into the night. On to the next roll. Roll 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another bonus. I don't think we've ever seen this prompt before. We're going to come up with the perfect zinger for whenever we catch whoever committed this crime. And so with the title and author, I need to spell nice. That's so silly. If you feel like you're missing some context for this prompt, my TBR game is inspired by Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and one of the main characters of Brooklyn Nine-Nine says nice pretty frequently, hence this prompt. And I can use the title plus the author, but I went just author here because I can take the NOI and C from Crichton and the E from Michael. So I read A Case for Need by Michael Crichton, which is a medical thriller, one of his early works, and I'm giving this 3.5 stars. In general, I really, really enjoyed this one. I read it in the course of a weekend, and it had me hooked. In this one, we're following a pathologist, and he gets a call because one of his physician friends has been put in jail and is facing charges of murder, potentially, because of something that they say that he did to one of his patients. So our main character is like, that doesn't seem right, and if this dude goes down, there are some things I've done to help him in his practice, and I'll go down too. And so I'm going to go and try to figure this case out. And so he does. He kind of abandons his job for a couple of days and tries to figure out what's going on. I am not in the medical profession, so I can't speak to the accuracy of this, but Michael Crichton has medical training, so I'm going to trust him on this one. And if my sister ever reads this and disagrees, she can have that opinion. She's training to be a physician, by the way. Super proud of her. It was fun stepping into her world for a bit during these pages. I don't feel like I read medical thrillers often, but this one was fun. It tackled some sensitive topics, so content warnings, if you want to look them up, go for it. And I will say the reason this isn't getting a 4-star is because the ending kind of fell apart for me. I don't feel like the reveals did enough for me. I felt like there was this larger conspiracy. It turned out not being as big as I thought it should be. But I still had a ton of fun reading this book. Out of all the Michael Crichton that I've read, I think this is definitely one of my top ones so far. That being said, I haven't read Jurassic Park yet, so we'll see. Prompt 7. A 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would really like to make it past this pink without it being anything terrible. Whew, we did it. We did it, fam. We need to write a warrant, and so we're reading a book published this year, a 2026 book. I can do that. Ignore All Previous Instructions came out in May of this year, so totally counts as being published this year. I listened to the audiobook and I'm giving it 3.5 stars. In this one, we're following Kelly. She's a script supervisor for a Gen AI that's in charge of like all of the creative content. Basically, humans are just there to like supervise what AI is doing because there are very specific rules about what kind of content gets shown. And one day, her ex from childhood shows up and he's like, I need you to come with me in my spaceship for a very specific reason, and there is heisting involved and blackmail and all of those things. We've got some awesome representation in this book. Our main character has autism spectrum disorder, which is like a big focus of the book and how she sees the world. There's lots of discussions about queer identity. Her ex is trans, and growing up, there was like a lot of discussion in the past timeline about their identity as queer individuals. So that was great, and I thought that the premise was really interesting. And it was also really relatable because to get through most things and like be brave in situations where she needed to be brave, our main character would ask herself, like, what would Orlando do? And Orlando is the fictional character who stars in the show that she's a script supervisor for. And the idea of like pretending you're someone else to make your way through difficult situations is something I relate to a lot, something that I do very, very often. And not only Kelly, but also Rowan used that tool multiple times in the course of this book, because the stories that we tell about ourselves matter, and sometimes we need to look at ourselves differently or as a character in order to access different parts of ourselves. So I appreciated all those conversations. I don't love how it ended, and I also personally didn't feel like the stakes were high enough, but maybe that's because I was listening to it on audiobook, so I really didn't feel it in the same way. Who's to say? All I know is that it was published this year. I had a fun time with it, and I think it had some really good and interesting discussions. So 3.5 stars it is. Next up, 1. At least we're past the pinks. We're going to question a suspect and read a book with a 1-word title. Luckily, it's only originally worth 1 point because that's all we were getting for it anyway. My 1-word title is Spring, which is a translated work originally written in Norwegian, and I'm giving it 3 stars. This book is technically the 3rd in a series, but I feel like I totally understood what was happening regardless, because in this series, a dad is telling his youngest child about the world, and in this particular installment, he is mainly talking about his experience taking care of his 3 kids when their mom is away. She has encountered some really serious mental health issues, and so there's lots of discussions about maternal mental health in this one, but from the perspective of a father, which is interesting because I feel like I've read a lot of books about maternal mental health, but from the perspective of the mother and not the perspective of the father, so that was pretty interesting. I will say the main thing working against this book is the writing style, which I can't decide if that's because of the translation or how it was originally written. My assumption is that it's how it was originally written, because the problem is that this book has so many sentences that are like half a page long. Like sometimes you look at a paragraph that's half of the page, but it's actually just 1 sentence. And there are so many commas, and it's hard to follow what is happening in that sentence. Like, where are you going? If you're going there for half of a page, I'm going to get lost along the way. It's not in my nature to be really good at sprawling sentences. Like, I can't fathom why you would do that, but even if there's a good reason, it really didn't work for me. So 3 stars it is. Next roll. Ooh, a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Case closed. And with that, our case is closed. This case, we got 19 cool points, and I finished reading for this episode during the middle of Wonderthon, so in time for the deadline, even though this video is going up after July has started. And adding those 19 cool points to the previous cool points we've won this year brings us to a current total of 46 cool points for 2026, which we really need to up if the end of the year is going to go at all our way. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below what was your favorite prompt from this round, and subscribe for more bookish and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!